program.
What you talking about?
The program. The program. Get with the program.
Everybody clap to this. Say what?
Get with the program.
It starts now.
Hello and welcome to Get With The Program Radio Show. I'm your host, Gary Jones. Now, Get With The Program Radio Show is a multicultural, informative, relevant, and entertaining one-hour weekly show offering you a combination of diverse interviews with questions and comments. And as always, we will act as a positive source of information. Now, listen, if you want to be a guest on the show, all you have to do is log into www.getwiththeprogram.biz. Shoot me an email, leave me a message. You never know. You may have a conversation that we would love to talk about. Or give me a call at 919-665-1118. Again, that's 919-665-1118, or go to the website www.getwiththeprogram.biz. Now listen, today we're going to be joining a conversation with Richard Watkins. Now, Richard Watkins, raised in Greensboro, North Carolina. Watkins earned his Ph.D. from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill prior to attending UNC. Dr. Watkins, that is, earned a B.S. in psychology with a minor in sociology from Fayetteville State University. Richard is the founder and CEO of the Science Policy Action Network, SPAN, formed in 2014 to fill dangerous gaps between scientific advancement and stakeholders. Now, SPAN envisions a scientific enterprise that grows and creates opportunities, binding its success with prosperity for society as a whole. Now, he is a husband, father, North Carolinian, and candidate for U.S. Senate. Hello, Richard. Welcome to Get With The Program Radio Show.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
Hey, man, it is a pleasure, man. You know, getting you off the road because, you know, when you're running for office, you know, that's a busy type thing.
Yeah, it is.
And I know you're running hard right now, right?
Yeah, running full throttle 24/7. I'm trying to find another hour in the day, but I haven't been successful at it yet. But right now it's 24/7.
Well, when you win Senate, we're going to see if you have much time at all then.
Oh, yeah. And I'll come back down here and do an interview. It'll be a great interview as, you know, the first black senator of North Carolina. So that'll be fun.
That's going to be great, man. That's going to be great. First black senator.
First black senator ever elected out of the state of North Carolina. And I mean, not even that. I'll be the first of my generation ever to serve in Senate. So I'll be the first millennial ever elected to the state of North Carolina. And also the first scientist ever elected to the state of North Carolina.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's a shame that we have never had those things. Every time you make history at this day and age, you're like, what, really? Mm-hmm. We're still trying to accomplish that? But yeah, you got to have a Senate scientist elected representing North Carolina because you can't even spell science without NC. So it's beyond time for that. So
I'm trying to grasp that. So we have a scientist and a senator. So you're going to put that in one bowl and mix it up.
Yep.
And analyze it.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure out how to refer to me. Senator Dr. Watkins, I guess. I think that'll sound good. I think they can do that. Yeah.
Now, my question is, I hear this a lot, senator. What is the role of a senator? Because I know my listeners, we see that Senate such and such, Senate such and such. What is their actual role?
Yeah, just to pass legislation. They're a single chamber of the legislature, right? So the legislature is broke up into two chambers at the federal level. One chamber is the House of Representatives, and that's based off of population. And the other chamber is the Senate. And every state gets 2 senators. So there are 100 senators serving the United States of America. And they work together. So a bill, in order to become a law, has to go through both chambers. And both chambers have to vote to approve that bill to become a law. And then ultimately it's signed into law by the President of the United States. So policy, legislation, law creation, that is the role of the Senate along with the House of Representatives.
Wow. So I'm hearing 2 senates for each state.
Yes.
And how did they do that? I mean, because some states have more population than others.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Every single state, no matter how small or how large, they all get 2 senators. It was part of a balancing act, right? It was thought to be the case that just because a state has a large population doesn't necessarily give them the right to dominate all the other states. So as a compromise, they had the House of Representatives based off of population, but they had the Senate just have 2 senators per state as a way, I guess, to even the playing field. So it has nothing to do with population. All states just get 2 senators.
Wow, do you think it's long overdue for a black senator?
Yeah, I mean, it's long overdue for a lot of things. I mean, we do talk about, you know, a black senator, but also, you know, I'm in the middle class, right? All of our senators and all of our politicians are rich. And therefore, the policies that they put forth usually cater to the rich. You very rarely have a situation where you have somebody from the middle class, representing populations that are either majority middle class or majority poverty. And I think that's why you have a system that doesn't really work well for the middle class or the poor, because you have nobody in leadership positions from those populations. And the problem with that is that you don't really have a representative democracy at that point. If the majority of your population is either poor or middle class, and then all of the leaders and lawmakers are all rich, you see the problem there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and it's really hard running, right? So if you're a rich person running for office, you have all of these resources at your disposal. If you're a working class person running for this position, you've got to quit your job, potentially lose your health insurance. It's a much more difficult game, but these are the things that you have to do to make it, as they say, a more perfect union.
So when you become senator, actually, this is going to be full time for you. You're going to leave. If you're working, whatever you do, you're going to leave that and go full time as a senator.
Yes, absolutely. It's a full time job. It's a full time gig.
So I can imagine when one becomes a senator and then a few years later he's not a senator anymore, so he has to come back and get back into the world of work.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's probably a lot different at that point. Going into a job interview.
Yeah,
and because most of the people struggle on job interviews, like, what have you been doing for the past?
Right.
You're going to look at it. And,
you're overqualified.
Yeah, they're probably just going to pick you up as like a professor at some university.
Right.
That would be great, right? To serve as like a senator and be able to go back to Fayetteville State and like serve as a professor, and like that's going to be so attractive for like students. But hey, come to Fayetteville State and meet the first Black senator of North Carolina serving on our faculty.
That's gonna be wonderful, man.
Yeah.
HBCU. That's gonna be wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And obviously, it'll be the first of that as well. So
now I noticed you mentioned, speaking of HBCU, I know you mentioned there's nothing like the HBCU experience. I did read that. And you grew up around North Carolina A&T, and you say your dad still teaches golf there.
Yeah, he does. He's the head golf coach, men's and women's golf coach at North Carolina A&T.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm an HBCU guy too.
Oh, where you at?
Shaw grad.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
So I have to remind you guys come from us. You guys started in the basement of Shaw University.
I know y'all the first in North Carolina. But Fayetteville State, we always used to compete against you in the CIAA, and so I have a different relationship with Shaw than North Carolina A&T, because we used to lock up with y'all on the gridiron.
That's right, the gridiron brawl.
Yeah, so it's all good. It's all good.
So you play sports, then?
I played at Fayetteville State. I played wide receiver. Now we would come out on top on all those competitions, but still, right?
This guy's all around guy, scientist, athlete. They're gonna run for senator. Oh man, this is incredible. Now, what inspired you to be a scientist?
So you just wanted to create an impact, and the story is that when I was growing up, there was such a huge campaign for, getting tested for HIV, right? That was a big thing when I was in college. Know your status. All the student organizations would encourage the student population to go get tested and know their status. And so I remember going to get tested and, just and back in those days, and I don't want to act like I'm old, but, technology has developed over time.
Yes.
But, back in those days, you would have to wait some time to get your results back from your HIV test. And over that time, you start playing all these like mental gymnastics in your head, like the stages of acceptance, right? You've got denial, you've got, rage, you got fear, depression, all those before you get sorrow, before you get to acceptance.
Absolutely.
But you also have a stage called bargaining, right? Where you're like, it doesn't matter, what you believe in, right? You pray to something outside of yourself, or you talk to something outside of yourself, and you say, oh, if I just make it through this, I promise I'll never do this, that, or the other again. And in my situation, if I were to be HIV positive, I used to say, like, I would be sitting there waiting for somebody to come up with a breakthrough that saved my life. And so if I was to be HIV negative, then I would dedicate my life to science and study HIV. And at that time when I made that deal, I didn't know how that was going to actually happen. But I remember sitting at that desk at the health department in Greensboro, and they're like, Richard, you're HIV negative. And I was like, oh, man. Oh, negative. That's the good one. All right. Whew. Oh, negative. And then getting out of the building and the sun hitting my face feels like you just have like a new lease on life and all that stuff. And then you get in the car and you're like, oh, wait, I've got to keep my end of the deal. And, at that point, I had to figure out how was I going to become a scientist? How was I going to study HIV? How was I going to do that? Where was I going to do that? And I had to change gears entirely to do that. And, I have no idea. You don't have to understand the path that you walk, but there's a path laid out in front of me. And God was guiding my activities and my steps. And somehow or another, I ended up at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who just prior to that was really building up its departments and infectious diseases. But by the time I had the tremendous opportunity to join on as a graduate student, they had become in the top 10 internationally for HIV research. Wow. Top 10 internationally. I went from figuring out like how was I going to do this to being part of one of the world's greatest research infrastructures regarding HIV.
Wow.
And I still
huge.
to this day can't figure out how that happened, but I'm blessed.
Huge. That's huge. Listen, what we're going to do, we're going to take a break, Richard. Today we're joining a conversation with Richard Watkins. He's a North Carolina candidate for U.S. Senate. So, an African-American brother as well, black man. But we're going to take a break. We're going to be right back after this. Hello and welcome back to Get With The Program radio show. Again, I'm your host, Gary Jones. Now, today we are joined in a conversation with Richard Watkins. Richard Watkins is a candidate for U.S. Senate, North Carolina, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely,
US
man,
Senate.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to go back and tell you that the brother is raised in Greensboro, North Carolina, and he's earned a Ph.D. from the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill. Prior to attending UNC, Dr. Watkins earned a B.S. in psychology with a minor in sociology from Fayetteville State University. Richard is the founder and CEO of the Science Policy Action Network, formed in 2014 to fill dangerous gaps between scientific advancement and stakeholders. SPAN envisions a scientific enterprise that grows and creates opportunities, binding its success with the prosperity of society as a whole. Now, Richard, I'm going to go back a little bit now. I'm going to ask you, who was Richard during his early childhood years? Tell me about your early childhood years.
I always loved sports and always loved, family. That was always really big for me. Some of my family lives out in Washington State, and so Christmas and summertime, it was great to be able to go over to the other side of the country.
Oh, yeah, West Coast.
Yeah, spend time with them. Pacific Northwest at that is just completely different, just atmosphere, environment. So that was really good. And being able to wake up in the morning and hear, the old folks in my family, grandfather and granduncles, downstairs arguing about politics and, just being able to sit as a little kid down there at the dining room table and listen to them argue. I used to just love listening to them argue. They would argue about sports. They would argue about politics. They would argue about the shade of green the grass was. But, just being able to participate in that. And, when I got old enough to join into the arguments myself. And so that was a lot of fun. But I was also always really big into sports. And my dad has always been, really big into sports himself. And so growing up in Texas, I was born in Tyler, Texas. My dad was the head baseball coach, athletic director, and head volleyball coach for a small HBCU called Texas College. It was a CME college, Texas College. And I would just grow up as the bat boy hanging around, these college athletes. It was just always really just amazing to be able to do. And then when he was able to make it over to North Carolina A&T, my family, we left. My mom was a social worker at Guilford County Department of Social Work. And, my dad was the baseball coach for North Carolina A&T. And being able to hang out with them as a bat boy, travel with them across the state, across the east coast of the country was just always really fun. And so, I was always been around sports. I was a speed skater. That's always something good, interesting to throw in. A speed skater? Yeah.
You mean like a roller derby type? What do you mean?
No, you race basically on inline skates.
Wow.
Yeah, I always say that because that's like such an odd sport for people. It
is because I hadn't heard of that. I mean, I'm not sure when I think of roller derby or somebody just going to skate rink. Speed is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. Around a rink, around the floor, 100 meters as fast as possible. And I was able to place at nationals and junior Olympic status, and it was just really, really great. My sister did it too, and so it was a big thing, but. I also played baseball, ran track, and obviously played football. So it sounds like to me
going for Senate, you're well rounded. I mean, science.
Well, I think more important than that is those are just the identities that I hold. I think you can have any identity and serve in Senate, right? But I think you have to be able to want a better world for people, yes, right? Not just one type of people. right? Not just rich people, not just corporations, but to really work to make people's lives better. I think you can judge a society by how it treats its poor and how it treats its sick. And I think the role of a senator is to serve and to serve the most vulnerable. And I think if you can do that and your heart's in that place, it doesn't matter if you've played sports. It doesn't matter if you've played an instrument. I just think that's what matters.
Now, what would your past self say about you running for political office?
I guess my past self would be proud. My past self would just say, just work hard. You never know what's going to happen or what obstacles are going to be thrown in your way, but, just work. That's all you can control is the effort that you put forth in a moment, right? Give everybody all of yourself. Give every situation the best you can possibly give it, and then let the chips fall where they may. Like I said, you can't control what is going to happen to you the next day, but one of the things that you can do is give every moment all that you have. And so I think that's what my past self would tell my future self, but I think my past self would have a difficult time saying that without picking their jaw up from the ground, because I don't think my past self would have saw this coming. Like a Ph.D., a business owner, a man of faith. I go to St. Joseph CME, which is ironic, right? Because my dad was at a CME college when I was little, and then to be a member of the CME Church, Christian Methodist Episcopal St. Joseph in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and serve as the president of the laity. I mean, that's also a tremendous experience as well. I don't think my past self would have envisioned this, but
well, you're married with kids.
Yes, a daughter, 5 years old. Absolutely.
Now, how did your wife react to you when you told her that you was running for U.S. Senate?
We both were like, we don't really know what we're getting ourselves into, but we both know we're like, we got to do what we can to make this world a better place. My wife is a social work assistant professor at North Carolina Central University. And so we're always sitting there like watching the news, keeping up, just wondering like, why aren't our leaders doing the things that we think they should do? Why aren't they advocating for things that we think they should advocate for? Why aren't they fighting for the things that we think they should fight for? And then at the end of the day, we realize sometimes you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. And so while it's very stressful and very, very hard, we both are committed to making the world a better place in our own respective disciplines. She's in education, focused on social work, one of the greatest minds in the nation. And I'm in my area, trying to make history. And so it'll be different. You know how it says, behind every great man is a great woman. That's not necessarily the case in my situation, because, my wife doesn't like stand behind me, holding me up, pushing me. We are standing shoulder to shoulder, trying to make advancements in our own respective fields. So, she doesn't necessarily have time to like be behind me, supporting me all the time, because she's grinding and creating breakthroughs in her own right. And so that's, our relationship. And so it's amazing to be married to her. She's the greatest person I've ever met.
Wonderful. Now, what compelled you to run for U.S. Senate? Something you saw. I know you said, you just mentioned that. What are some of these leaders doing? What compelled you to do this?
I don't know if I necessarily would have run for Senate, just trying to think about it, had I not have a daughter, right, that's going to have to grow up in this world. I think if I didn't have another generation to think about, I think I'd just probably be concerned with, what's happening to me in the present, just trying to do what I can do. But having a daughter really just changes it, right? Because you look at the direction that the country is going in, and you are imagining her having to grow up in this country. Now, keep in mind, we're in the midst of a pandemic, right?
Right.
Like nobody's ever expected this to happen. And as a virologist, I can tell you, we knew that this was going to happen, but leaders never took heed to our warnings, took heed to the investments that we were asking. When SARS came out, when I started doing research, virology, I cut my teeth on one of my rotations and coronaviruses and SARS. And I remember having to go to a meeting, and there was somebody at the meeting who was looking in bat poop, and bats are the natural reservoirs of coronaviruses. And he found in the bat poop all of these coronaviruses that were already capable of jumping into people and creating disease if given the opportunity. And so we were like, the next one is around the corner. MERS came, and then SARS-CoV-2 came. And so what I'll say is, and this ties back to the question that you were asking, this is not even going to be the last coronavirus that we're going to deal with. I mean, it's not even going to be the last virus in general that we're going to have to deal with. And these pandemics, they're going to become more frequent. Just close your eyes and think. It feels like all the time we're having to deal with something that is threatening us.
Absolutely.
Whether it's Ebola, whether it's Zika, whether it's a new flu strain, whether it's coronavirus, and we're going to continue to deal with it. And then climate crisis.
That's a whole nother
one
ball
of
game.
two things right now that on the other side of that is extinction if we don't do it right. Nuclear war is one. The climate crisis is another. And I don't think no time in human history have we really had to contemplate our very own extinction of our species. And I think that's a new world that we're living in now. And obviously it's a world where we don't see leaders approaching it as if that's the case. But obviously there's a new type of leadership coming.
Wonderful. Okay, what we're going to do again, Richard, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to have more conversation here with Richard Watkins, candidate for U.S. Senate. Listen, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after this. Now I want to reach out to Steve Rao and Kathy Greggs. Steve Rao, what's going on in your world?
Well, Gary, it's great to be here to do my commentary. And normally we're talking about the president, the U.S. Senate, the U.S. Congress. But one thing we haven't talked a lot about is the Supreme Court of the United States. With Donald Trump's 3 appointees, it's starting to come into focus if you look at the decisions. They're ideologically predictable and unpredictable, depending on the issue. The court is conservative, but not uniformly so. Majorities often transcend ideological lines, with decisions sometimes disappointing conservative activists. The most recent one is the upholding of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. But Gary, on issues of voting rights, as 18 states have passed a number of laws that would actually curb the number of times that absentee ballots are counted, laws that would require voter ID, laws that would make it harder for minority communities to vote. The Supreme Court has upheld these states' decisions and actually put the control back in the Republican legislatures across this country. This is actually making it very clear that the United States Supreme Court can affect the outcome of our elections. If they can do that, they can draw the lines, hold the majorities in the Congress and Senate, and even affect their presidential run in 2024. Only time will tell, but the bottom line is this. The Supreme Court justices are making it one thing clear. They want the states to have the ability to restrict voting rights, and that could be very dangerous for our democracy.
Thank you so much, Steve Rao. Want the states to have restrictions on voting rights. Isn't that something? Listen. Okay, now I want to reach out to Kathy Greggs. Kathy Greggs, what's going on in your world?
Gary, is that we must honor the fact that Simone Biles was willing to step down and take care of herself during the Tokyo Olympics. We must understand that self-love and self-care is very important when it comes to mental health and being a celebrity and out in the opening like that. And I really honor her for doing that as a woman, as a Black woman, and as an athlete. You showed us that we must be courageous to step down and take care of ourselves.
Once again, that is so true, Kathy. I appreciate that. Once again, you listen to Get With The Program Radio Show. I'm your host, Gary Jones. Listen, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after this. Hello, welcome back to Get With The Program Radio Show. Again, I am your host. Today, we're joining the conversation with Richard Watkins. Watkins is a candidate for U.S. Senate. He's running and he's in it to win it, from what I'm hearing. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here. Definitely in it to win it.
Yeah, I hear you. Speaking of voting, yes. Richard, what is your take on voter suppression?
Oh, it's despicable. I mean, it's taxation without representation. I mean, we fought a revolutionary war for that reason. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's antithetical to everything that's important to our nation. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are trying to do it, but we have to stop it. No matter the law that is put in place, right? They make it harder to vote. You have to work harder to vote, right? They make it harder to vote. You have to make sure you win elections and support the right to vote from the federal level. So I support the legislation, whether it's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act or the For the People Act. I support those, creating a baseline for voting across the country, even though at various states, voter rights and voter suppression, those are things that are very, very real. And I think these are things that people need to care about. Mm-hmm. People do care about it. But my sense is that most people don't feel a necessary connection to democracy in our country. And I noticed that from, being on the ground. So you interact with two separate circles. There's a smaller circle that cares everything about politics. They're showing up for everything, whether they're your donors, whether they're your politicians, whether they're the community leaders and organizers. But then you've got the vast majority of the population that feel very separate from the democratic process. You know, we've been on the ground and they're the first, and these people are, you know, sometimes 70, 60, 50 years old. And they're saying like, we're the first ever Senate candidate that they've ever met. Right.
Wow.
And so we do live in a world where a lot of people don't vote. They don't have opportunity to vote, or they don't see the need to vote. And we've got to move in the direction of getting everybody 100% of the people who can vote. We need them to vote, and we need to make that more part of American culture than it is. And there's just a lot of different confusing things about voting. Like, for example, have you all ever heard this thing when it gets close to election time? People are standing around in clipboards and they're saying the deadline for registration is such and such. Has everybody heard that?
Absolutely.
Right. That's really misleading, right? So what if there's a situation where I missed that deadline and they're like, the registration for voting is past deadline, right? So I'm not voting. I missed it. But then come to find out, for early voting, you can register and vote at the same time. What's up with all that mixed messaging?
Right.
And I'm not even talking about voter suppression. I'm just talking about how complicated and how many mixed messages you get just about something that we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
And
right.
so I'm just always just frustrated. I honestly think it's done intentional. And so therefore I'll be intentional about making sure the right to vote is something that's universal for everyone. Everybody's provided the resources, the opportunity to vote and participate in voting, because it's absolutely required to have a functioning democracy, right? Functioning democracy. Right now, I don't think our democracy functions for everyone. It functions for the top 0.01%. You know, the type of people that take a joyride in a space for 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
That's who our government works for.
What are some of the biggest problems that you see with voter suppression? Where do you think we're going with this as the voting polls open up?
Well, I just think it's going to make it harder for poor people to vote. I mean, that's every single piece of legislation that these states are putting out is making it harder for poor people to vote. And since there is a disproportionate burden of poverty on the Black community, obviously it's going to hurt, you know, Black Americans too. There's going to be a racial situation to that. But by and by, it's just going to make it hard for poor people to vote. And these efforts are intentional to get the type of voters that you want to come out. So if you want a particular voter, this process of, you know, picking your voter, not the voter picking you, this is something that has really been accelerated recently.
Now, switching gears here, in reference to the justice system, do you see the justice system as being a problem?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, tell me what about.
So let's just go back. So almost all the problems that we're talking about here, and you're going to see this as a recurring theme, right? It's always, you know, a particular problem for poor people, right? Think about the justice system. Think about people in jail. Almost everybody in jail is poor. Just let that sink in. We in this country imprison more people than any other country, any other nation on earth. And everybody's poor. There's a problem there. Are poor people just bad? That's not possible. Because I believe that you can only judge a society by how it treats its poor and its sick. And look how we treat our poor and our sick. We lock them up. And even worse than that, we make a profit from locking them up. Now we're finally turning the tides as far as privatizing the prison industrial complex. But we've been making billions off of the incarceration of people just because they're poor. Oh, and also let's point out the fact that most people just enter a plea deal. They can't afford all the fancy lawyers and stuff like that. And they put them in a room and they start saying, hey, this is going to happen to you. Oh, and if you go and fight this, I guarantee you're going to lose. Oh, and so there's two different penalties, right? So if you admit to your guilt, you get this penalty. Now, if you want to fight it and say you're innocent and you're proven guilty, you're going to get this penalty. And you put somebody in there who don't know what's going on. You put them in a room and you're laying all this in front of them. They're scared out of their mind and they're going to take the plea deal. Most people are serving time and never even go into a courtroom to defend themselves because they can't afford all that stuff. Most people can't afford their bail. Come on, like, I feel like more people should be saying this than are saying it. Like, you'll turn on the news, you don't hear people saying this. When was the last time you turned on the news and they said, you know, we just live in a country that just locks poor people up? or less poor people die.
And it's almost like it's systematically put in place now. Police accountability.
Yeah.
When it comes to police accountability, you think they're getting served properly when they particularly do something wrong?
No. We need a method in place so people can seek justice. So we need to get rid of qualified immunity. Right, qualified immunity is in place. So if a harm is done to you, you can't seek justice against a government official, which includes police officers. But I want to say this right here, because ending qualified immunity is not just something that affects law enforcement. I repeat, getting rid of qualified immunity is not just something that affects law enforcement. It also affects me when I become the senator. So I'll live by a different set of laws than you'll have to. That ain't fair. The same set of laws should impact everyone equally. But what qualified immunity does is says that if you occupy this place in society, those laws don't particularly concern you. And that ain't right. And so, I mean, for your listeners out there, getting rid of qualified immunity is not just something that affects law enforcement. It affects all government officials, so that everybody, no matter who you are, you'll have to live by the same letter of the law that everyone else has to live by. So we need to get rid of that. But we also need to make sure that we are funding things properly, right? People are like, hey, do you support the police? Well, not necessarily. I support the people who serve as police. Now that might sound weird, right? Because I figure that police officers, they have children. So we need to invest properly in education so those children have a better education. I figure that police officers, they have healthcare concerns. So they need proper healthcare, proper investment in research so that they can have cures. They need mental health services because police officers, just like everybody else, have mental health concerns such as depression, right? PTSD, alcoholism. These are all things that we need, but the public narrative isn't set up in a way where we actually are concerned with the people who are police officers. We're overwhelmingly concerned with the idea of police officers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I know that's more like put the people first. People's always centered. Not just this idea, not just this infrastructure, not just the corporation that is these things, but putting the people front and center. So absolutely.
Wonderful. What we're going to do, Richard, we're going to take another break here. And when we come back, we'll have more conversation with Richard Watkins. Richard Watkins is a candidate for U.S. Senate. Okay, now I want to reach out to Baron Damon. Baron Damon is the travel expert here. Baron, what's going on with travel, man?
Before the pandemic happened in March of last year, you heard a lot about the Real ID that was supposed to become in effect on October 1st, 2020. If you're not as familiar with the Real ID, it was initially designed to keep U.S. citizens from holding multiple licenses, social security numbers, and to allow government officials to check immigration standings. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security was on track to implement the last phase of the Real ID enforcement that will require Americans to present Real ID complement driver's license or another acceptable form of ID to go through airport security. The Department of Homeland Security has extended the deadline for Americans to acquire a Real ID, which will be a new type of identification card required to fly domestically. The new date was October 2021, but that date, Gary, has been changed to May 3rd, 2023. Starting on May 3rd, 2023, people who want to fly from state to state will be required to show the new Real ID driver's license, aka complement or another federally approved form of identification, such as your passport. Next time you go renew your license, make sure you get your Real ID so you won't have any problems come May 3rd, 2023 when you want to jump on a plane and take a domestic flight. If you want to learn more about travel and how to save money when you travel, go to www.bolcctravel.com and sign up for our newsletter and even take our online course.
Thank you so much for that information, Baron. Okay, Ghetto Raunchy, what's going on in your world, brother?
Yeah, I got some stuff going on. I just don't understand the people who don't want to take the vaccination shot, but they like to eat hog maws, chitlins, and even roadkill. Now, you telling me you can eat all those things, but you can't take the vaccination shot? You think it's going to kill you? And you think the government is trying to track you? Well, listen up, people. The government is not trying to track you when you're on Facebook all day. Y'all keep listening to my man, Gary Jones. Peace out.
Okay, once again, you're listening to Get With The Program radio show. I'm your host, Gary Jones. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after this. Hello, welcome back to Get With The Program radio show again. I am your host, and we're joining the conversation today with Richard Watkins. Richard Watkins is a candidate for U.S. Senate, and he's an African-American, and this is going to be huge. It's going to be one of the first, when he wins, that would be the first time, to my understanding. Correct, Richard?
That's correct. That's correct.
Wow, this is going to be good. Once again, welcome back to the show. We're talking about a lot of things, man. Now, in this journey right here that you're running now, what has surprised you the most in your journey running for U.S. Senate? Now, have you, politics, this is your first time in politics?
Well, no, I ran for U.S. Congress before, but I've never served an elected position before.
Oh, wow, interesting. So what surprised you the most in this journey?
I think one of the things that surprised me the most is how the same message can be accepted by such a wide variety of people. Mm-hmm. I think I should have known that, but when you're actually experiencing, so you don't get that experience when you're running for Congress, right? Because you're just representing a particular area, mm-hmm. or running for state senate or state house because you're just representing a particular area of the state. But when you run for a statewide position that's like legislative in nature, you have to like make policy stances, mm-hmm. right? And I think if they're always, people centered and is directed at making people's lives better, that message just resonates well no matter who you're talking to. And I think that's just what surprised me. And just how, beautiful and different that the state is, right? Across the state, I think, you kind of get locked into, your area and what you're concerned with. And you forget that the state is like very long, very big, mm-hmm. and there's just a lot of different things out there. And, I think that's just one of the things that surprised me. And also, the people who like the message of somebody who's never, served in office before. I think that's been really surprising, is the amount of support that we've received. Mm-hmm. And it's been very, very humbling. I definitely, like I said, I could not have anticipated that. Mm-hmm. But when people, put their hopes and dreams and aspirations within you, that's a huge responsibility. Huge. And so I think that's been really, really surprising, just the amount of support that we've received as somebody who's not been in the game before.
Mm-hmm. Now, I ask this question often to political candidates who come on my show. Mm-hmm. A lot of candidates will say a lot of things when they're running for office, mm-hmm. to win.
Yeah.
How can we be sure that you will stand up for what you say? Because a lot of candidates get in office, they say things, but when they get in position, they do the total opposite. Mm-hmm. They forget where they came from. They forget what they said, mm-hmm. because now it's become politics. Yeah. What makes you different than the others?
Well, their problem is that they're career politicians. They're not just candidates, they're career politicians. And so you're asking them of things, and they're saying they're going to do things that they've never done. That's just the hardest part about that. I'm getting off the bench because I'm not satisfied with the way politics is going. That's a completely different entry point, right? The mm-hmm. career politician, most of which, let me just let's put this out here.
Okay.
This is a part that a lot of people they don't see. Most career politicians that you deal with, they were appointed to elected positions. Like, let me just say that again, because that is so contrary to democracy. Mm-hmm. Democracy is our representatives, we pick them, right? But that's not really what we have. We have people who become career politicians through an appointment to an elected position. What that means is that you have a small circle of the most powerful people in the state or the country, right? Mm-hmm. In the state, they have something that becomes open, and then they tap somebody on the shoulder and says, you're next. Mm-hmm. And we know the power of incumbency. Once you're an incumbent, by and large, you're just guaranteed your next position. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have a situation in which the people actually don't even have any control over what's going to happen. In many races, right, there's only one person for your party, because oftentimes primaries are discouraged against incumbents. They're discouraged. Mm-hmm. So when you get to the general and you're part of a party, you don't even have another choice, because you got to vote for the person who was just appointed. You didn't get a chance to pick them then. And now here you are in an us versus them mentality, where now all you have to vote for is the person in your party. Mm-hmm. Like, because I know that might sound kind of complicated, but the reason why I stress that out is because the reason why career politicians are so comfortable in just lying to your face, the reason why they're so comfortable at lying in your face is because they have never actually really needed you to get to where they are. I hope I said that clear enough, right? And for everybody out there listening who asked that question, the reason why career politicians can lie to your face so easily is because they never really needed you to get to where they are.
Right. So do you think a lot of this has to do with money-driven decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about the career politician, right? And being appointed. They're appointed for a reason by oftentimes the rich. Why would somebody appoint somebody? Because they believe that they will be there and advance the issues that they care about and will further be able to enrich them or gain them more power and influence. I mean, that's ultimately the name of the game. Why else would you pick a particular person and appoint them to an elected position and then just like kind of like shuffle them through the process and the machinery? So yeah, I would say it's all about money.
Your concerns, things that you're going to address. I did see you mentioned safety, health, opportunities, housing and jobs, equity. Let's talk about the opportunities. What are your methods and what do you have plans for opportunities?
Well, opportunity. Let's talk about education, right? So everybody needs to be provided a quality education, no matter where you live in the state or no matter where you live in the country. So I believe that universities, public universities, need to be free. I believe that community colleges need to be free, and I believe that trade schools need to be free. And then also we should get rid of student debt as well. I mean, that's what we're really talking about as far as opportunity. And then people are going to say, like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, well, I mean, it's supposed to be a public university. Last time I checked, that's free, right? So it just needs to be free. So that's what I really mean by opportunity right there. Also, people need to have access to quality jobs. They need to be able to protect themselves. I'm pro-union. I believe that people need to be paid at least $15 minimum wage. I also believe that people need to be guaranteed an income. Universal basic income is something that I support. Now, people are going to be like, what? You support universal blah, 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 blah. I will tell you that it's the most popular piece of legislation that has existed in recent history. You don't think it is? Well, how did you feel waiting for that COVID check?
That was one of my next questions. You also touched health. What is your take on health as far as what you see need to be changed?
Right. We need to have a system of universal health care. I'm an advocate and a supporter of improved Medicare for all. I also believe that we need to invest heavily in medical and scientific research so that we can have the cures tomorrow for the diseases that we deal with and take our lives today. Heavy investment in that area. We also need to invest in medical and hospital infrastructure and also work to improve the medical workforce and increase diversity within the medical workforce. I think the lack of diversity in the medical and scientific workforce is why you have some populations of individuals be more prone and more open to misinformation because we don't have medical expertise that is generated from those communities. I've always said both the message and the messenger matter. And when you don't have a messenger that comes from all walks of life, then you'll have communities that are more prone to misinformation. And we're seeing that with the COVID pandemic. But we have to increase the diversity of the scientific and medical workforce. If we do that, we'll have breakthroughs, we'll have cures today cures tomorrow that we don't have today. It'll be a game changer if we do these things.
And you also mentioned safety. Let's touch safety. What is your plans for safety?
So the first thing is we have to address the climate crisis, right? That's like if you were to pin me down and you're like, hey, what are the top 3 things? The climate crisis will be up there. Like I said, on the other end of that is extinction. And let me stress what I mean by like extinction. I'm not talking about like, the light switch is off for extinction. You don't address it, then you turn the light switch on for extinction. And today you're here and tomorrow you're not. No, I'm talking about a long, grueling process of which drought and famine, forced migration of peoples to different areas. Right now, we're living in the highest number of individuals migrating that has ever existed since World War II. And then you're going to have tensions arise when those people are migrating just to find food because they are living in areas that are suffering from drought and famine. And you're going to have a lot of civil unrest, civil conflict from those places that they're moving into. Then you couple on top of that diseases for which COVID-19 is just the beginning. Then you'll have situations like hurricanes. You'll have rising sea levels. and you might not pay attention to it. You'll have one building fall into the ocean, and you won't pay attention to it. You'll attribute it to other things, and then you'll have another building fall into the oceans. You'll have intensity of hurricanes. You'll have tornadoes, and then what you end up with is a gradual process that's nightmarish and grueling, but one in which you could have dealt with now.
Now, cybersecurity. Now we have that's a big thing too. So what's your take on that?
Cybersecurity, also, here's another thing that we're not investing enough in. I think the problem with government is, and government officials oftentimes, is that they're antiquated. They are only concerned with historic problems, which they haven't found a way to solve. But technology presents a situation in which technology develops exponentially. But government officials, they're kind of linear. I mean, you'll sit in a position of power until you just die or retire, right? But technology develops exponentially, and we don't have a federal standard for cybersecurity. The federal government can impose a federal standard that every company, every business, every federal organization needs to live up to this federal standard of cybersecurity, right? And also provide resources and training so people can protect themselves. But we're not doing enough, and we're vulnerable at all times, as you've seen in recent news, to cyber attacks, which can really shut a place down. A cyber attack on fuel can cause hysteria.
Yes.
You see how that happens?
Catastrophic.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So yeah, cybersecurity, we need to create federal standards and invest a lot more in our cybersecurity.
Wonderful. Richard Watkins, U.S. Senate. Running for Senate, man. Candidate.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Right here.
Hey, man, that's going to about wrap it up for the show, man. I'm glad you were able to make it out. I really appreciate that.
I'm glad you were able to have me. We had a great conversation.
Yeah, we got to bring you back.
You got to. Can
Yeah.
you go ahead and put it on the calendar?
Yeah.
I always like to hold people accountable, right? We got to hold people accountable. They say bring it back. I was like, let's go ahead and put it on the calendar. My phone's right here.
That accountability piece, we're going to hold you accountable too now. You
Hey,
got
I'm
that
coming
right.
back here when I become the first black senator, right? You can hold my feet to the flames.
I'm definitely going to do that.
All right.
Listen, once again, my name is Gary Jones. Get with the Program Radio Talk Show. Today, we join in a conversation with Richard Watkins, a candidate for U.S. Senate. Richard, thank you once again for being here.
Hey, thank you, and thank you for what you do. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Once again, you're listening to Gary Jones, Get with the Program Radio Show. As I always say, stay positive, keep your head up, and remember to
Get with the program.
What you talking about?
The program. The program. Get with the program.
Everybody clap to this. Say what?
Get with the program.
It starts now.